I'm Marilyn Priel. There are dozens of beautiful native plants in California, and the California Native Plant Society is doing what they can to preserve them. Stay with us and hear all about it. My guest is Steve Rosenthal, a retired high-tech worker and former president of the California Native Plant Society, the Santa Clara Valley chapter. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here and talk about these things that I care so very much about. And I hope this will be informative to your audience.
Oh, I know it will. Well, first of all, explain what is the California Native Society and how it came about.
The California Native Plant Society is a little more than a 50-year-old nonprofit that is headquartered in Sacramento. There are a little more than 30 chapters statewide, and each chapter works to protect native plants in that area, to encourage people to plant natives in their gardens, to instruct folks in the ecological importance of native plants, and to assist in landscaping and in home gardens. So one of the things that we do in Santa Clara Valley is that we have a Gardening with Natives group, and they host about 50 talks a year. And they're held at various libraries throughout the valley, in Palo Alto, Los Altos, San Jose, Campbell, all over. And, we also have a YouTube channel, and we've had hits from as far away as Russia, and, people
They're
as
planning a move to California, are they?
Perhaps, or maybe they just find the information about botany intriguing.
They love plants, perhaps.
They love plants.
Well, now, how's determined what is, because there are so many different climate zones in California, for instance. How is it determined what is an actual native plant per region?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And it turns out that the definition goes something like this. If the plant was here at the time that Europeans came into California, we call it native.
So would that include mustard then?
The mustards planted that. They brought that from Europe, so that's non-native.
Okay.
But I've got an interesting tree over there. It's called a Ginkgo tree.
Oh, I love those.
And Ginkgo was native
Sounds Japanese.
30,000 years ago, or maybe 130,000 years ago. But it died off in during the last glacial period. So it's considered non-native even though it was here long ago. But it doesn't exist in the wild today.
So it's basically, perhaps they started cataloging these things when the Europeans came. So they're just basing it on what was here at that time.
Right.
So if somebody, for instance, wanted to, because I'm assuming that if you purchase plants that are native to your region, they're going to thrive better than something that, say, shamrocks from Ireland that have to be in the shade and a lot of moisture. So I'm assuming that they're easier to grow in your yard.
That's absolutely correct. So the local natives if it's a local native, nobody waters it because it's out in the wild, right? So it's a plant that knows how to survive through our climate without any extra help. The other thing that's really important to understand is that natives have built up relationships with wildlife so that bees and birds, they're the preferred food for birds, they're the preferred nectaring sources for hummingbirds, they're the preferred pollen sources for bees, and so much more.
Now, if, say, I wanted to start up a yard and have all native plants in it, where would I go to find out the list of native plants? It's just, I guess, on the internet now. Ask
Yeah.
for a list of native plants in the Santa Clara Valley.
So
Is it accessible to everyone then?
absolutely. So there are a number of places you could go, but the place that I think is the best is CalFlora, and it's
That's a website.
It's a website, and so if you go to calflora.org, on the left-hand side you'll see a link that says what grows here, and you click that and you put a mark. You move the map around and you put a mark on the map by your house.
So we don't have to join your organization to find out where the native plants are.
No.
Would would a typical nursery, and you go in, do they know what's a California native plant?
Most of them do.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah, and so, but you know, you bring up an interesting question. So you don't need to join our organization to find
I'm
out
just
what's
playing with you a
Yeah,
little bit.
but you know, almost all of the things that we do are free to and open to the public. So, you know, to go to
Your
our talks at the lectures, to go on most of our hikes, everything we do is open to the public because education is one of the things that we value the most. So we love to educate the public. We love to educate kids, and so sometimes we'll give talks in schools, and it's all free.
Now, I'm wondering, it seemed, at first thought, you would say, well, it's easier than maintaining a lawn and having to mow the lawn, but there has to be a lot of work in keeping these and separating them when they get too thick, and is there considerable maintenance on having a yard that's just full of nothing but native plants?
Yeah, you know, it depends upon how you like your garden. You know, I like my garden a little wild, but I typically don't spend more than the average homeowner doing maintenance.
Okay.
The maintenance is different, and there are things that you can do that are important to reducing the amount of work you have to put into it. And if you look down along by our feet at some point, you'll see that, you know, we're sitting on mulch here. And if you have about 4 inches of mulch, weeds won't go through that 4 inches. They don't get light,
Okay.
and you
Right.
don't end up having to
That's right.
weed.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, now let's talk about invasive plants. Now, I'm wondering about poppies because they're one of the most beautiful little flowers there are, and they seem to run wild. So, what is an invasive plant?
Okay. So an invasive plant is typically a non-native that is aggressive in the way it grows. Now, these California poppies that you're talking about are our state flower. We don't typically call them invasive because they're not invading, they've always lived here.
But they can
But they
take
can
over.
be aggressive. But a nice thing about that is that they will form big mounds. They'll block out the light, and typically you don't have a lot of weeds growing through poppies. You know, a trick about poppies, keeping them blooming for maybe 6 months out of the year is to cut them back when they look tired, and they'll grow fresh foliage and new flowers, and you can get them blooming from early spring into mid to late summer. So I just had to put that in there.
I'm happy to know that. Now, why then, if a plant is hardy and it comes in and takes over, it's considered invasive, why does your group not just allow them, to evolve and take over? Why do you not want that?
Right. So it turns out that plants react with birds and bees and other wildlife, and those wild creatures, the insects, the birds, and to a certain extent, larger animals have favorite foods. And if you came from Italy, you might love your pastas, and but if you came from the Far East, you might not have those affinities. Well, insects do too. And so it turns out that native plants are more valuable, as a rule, to native insects than something that's imported. Okay. The other thing about plants coming from other parts of the world is that we see sometimes when you bring a plant in from another part of the world, you bring a disease in with it. And that happened with sudden oak death. It's happened with a lot of diseases, and that's because plants that have evolved with particular kinds of predators have built up a resistance. When you get a new disease into an area, we as humans or plants don't have any resistance. So the natives.
Like when the Spanish went into Mexico and brought all the diseases to the
That's
natives
exactly
there.
what happened. Yep.
Okay. Well, now, what are some projects that I know your group, they have open houses for members, and certain times of year they open their yards to the public where people can come in and look at all the native plants. But your group, your society also does other projects, and I want you to tell me what your chapter has done in the past couple of years, and you as president initiated it and oversaw it, so tell us about that.
All right. Well, I don't get all the credit. I've worked. I was president for a number of years, but so we talked about these gardening with native talks. We have a Google group, or excuse me, a Yahoo group where people can submit questions about natives, and they can upload photos and ask questions about ID, or questions about pruning, or questions about diseases, or suggestions for what might grow in a particular area, and that's all free. We have in the spring, we've got a great event that we hold usually at West Valley College now, which is the Wildflower Show. It's just over for the season. We've got the Going Native Garden Tour, and where you can visit as many as 60 different gardens over a period of a couple of days. And you can look at people's designs, and you can ask them questions about how easy it was to do, what they learned from the garden, things like that.
What about big things, like
Okay.
for instance what you're doing out at Alum Rock Park?
Okay. So we have a number of sites where we do restoration. One is at Alum Rock Park that I'm involved in, and we have 3 restoration sites there. One is in a oak woodland, which is uh, really shady, but there was a fire there about 8 years ago. And when it opened up the canopy and a lot of light got down, there were a bunch of thistles and invasive plants that took hold. Well, we've gotten a lot of those invasive plants out. We continue to work there. We had some work at a place called Inspiration Point, which has beautiful views of the valley, and 3 kinds of oaks. We've got blue oaks there, we've got coast live oaks, and we've got valley oaks there.
So what are you doing in the way of restoring then? What kinds of things, activities?
Great question. So, because of some of these diseases that have come in from other countries, like sudden oak death, we're no longer planting plants, but what we do is plant seeds. But by doing that, we're not bringing other soils into the park. It means we're a lot safer, okay? There's another restoration that we do. It's called Edgewood, and that's over on the west part of the bay, and it's a really interesting place. They've been working restoration there for 20 years. So
what do? You clear out the invasive plants,
yep.
and what do you do with them? Just, we don't want them, do we? So you dispose of those, I guess.
Right. So
And then you clear out the invasive. You do what you can to prevent diseases, and then you bring in more native plants and
yes,
plant them at these locations.
right. So what we'll do is we'll compost the non-natives. So we break down all that plant material. We rot the seeds because they can't. It's a big pile. It might be 4 foot tall. No light gets to those seeds, and they rot and they die. The compost forms fertilizer, and it's all the better for the natives, right?
Now this is all volunteer, and you have other people who maybe are not members, but who like to volunteer and come up and work in these sites and help you dig and rake and hoe and plant and do that sort of things.
Absolutely. So we've got quite a few school kids who come in. There's a wonderful teacher up in the Fremont School District who refers students to us, and they learn about invasives, they learn about how natives grow, and then they write papers to demonstrate the knowledge, and I think that's just a wonderful thing. And we're happy to work with school groups. We also work with corporate groups, and we work with regular visitors to the park who might want to come. We have work days every Monday morning at 9 a.m.
And this, anyone who wants to work can.
Anyone who wants to work can come join us. They'll learn about better, more efficient ways of weeding. They'll also learn a lot about the native plants. We call it Weed and Walk.
So if someone wants to become a member of your society, or even just to volunteer, to go on your work days and just be outdoors and help out a little bit and work, is there a website that they can contact and get more information?
Sure. So the CNPS website is cnps.org.
California
Native Plant Society,
Society.
cnps.org. Okay. And there you can join on the website. There's a
So
lot
you
of
join the society and then you move over for locally to your local chapter then. So.
Yes, but as I've said, you don't need to be a member for most things. We'd love you to become a member because that's how we fund our activities in large to large degree.
What are the dues?
The dues are, I think, $30 a year, either $30 or $40 a year.
Yeah, I suppose you have some activities for chapter members to kind of entice people to want to be part of that.
We do. We have a nursery. So one of the advantages to being a member is that you get a discount at the nursery.
So there's your $30.
Yeah, and if
And
you're
more.
if you're going to be planting a yard full of natives, you can save a lot of money that way. But you know, another thing is that I lead hikes up, trips up to Mount Hamilton for rare plants, because that's limited to about 15 people. That's members only. There are a number of members only events, but most of them are open to the public.
Now, if someone wants to just go on a work day and just dig and volunteer and be a helper, do they contact that? Who do they contact for that?
Okay, so if you'd like to become, if you'd like to work at Alum Rock Park, we'd love you to just show up any Monday morning at 9 a.m. If
Where
you're,
do they show up?
So we meet usually at the end of the road in Alum Rock Park by the Youth Science Institute.
Oh, right.
But if you're a child, or if you have a child that wants to volunteer, someone under 18, we need a parent's signature on the release form. Everybody will sign a release form. There is a Yahoo group that we use for our Alum Rock restoration, and it's groups.yahoo.com / Alum Rock Park Volunteers, and I'll send you a link to that so you can put it at the put a link out on
Okay. Well, now at an earlier time, you took us up to Alum Rock Park, to your favorite place. It's Inspiration Point. And we want to show, we took a little footage then, and we want to run that and show that right now.
That would be wonderful.
We're at Inspiration Point, and you're really partial to this point, and you want to tell me why.
Oh, you bet. So it's really well named. It's inspiring. There's a great view. There's wonderful plants up here. The view of all this oak woodland, it's a mixed oak woodland with buckeye trees and elderberry trees. In the spring, there's lots and lots of wildflowers. We've got a beehive just downhill from here, and the bees are living in an old oak tree that has a hollow in it. And there's we get all kinds of birds flying through, the butterflies that feed on the buckeye trees when they're in bloom like now. It's really gorgeous.
You really like nature, don't you?
I really like nature.
So you were a high-tech worker. You retired, and you're pretty much devoting most of your time to taking care of these native plants, I understand.
I am. So between restoration, so we've got 3 sites here. One is here at Inspiration Point. Another one is at a place we call the Fire Meadow, because there was a fire. It all got burned out. But, and the place was full of thistle. It was very ugly. We've pulled out all that thistle, and it's not totally gone, but it's mainly gone now. And we're seeing all kinds of native plants come back. When you have a fire, you get native plants that are called fire followers, and they know in their DNA. They know that once there's a fire, there's going to be light in this once dark forest, because the trees got burned out, and they take advantage of that, and for a number of years they come up and they produce this really nice floral show. So this is a north-facing slope, and in a north-facing slope you never get really hard light. So you've got this mottled shade, especially with the, we have a blue oak here. There's valley oaks and coast live oaks downslope of us. But on the far side, you can see it's all grassland, because that is south facing, and it gets the full onslaught of the sun. And so this is a very diverse park. It's got shady areas, it's got full sun areas, it's got plants that like all kinds of different conditions. And it's got birds and bees that like various plants because that's what makes an ecosystem. So it's just a place where I really love to hang my hat.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing all this.
Sure. It's my pleasure. It's what makes me want to live.
Well, I can understand why you think it's so beautiful and why it makes you so happy to be working and taking care of these places. And thanks so much for inviting us to your beautiful yard and talking with us about the native plants.
Thank you very much.